Today we're going to look at racism and disabilities, and this provides just an overview. There is racism in the special education silo. Now, disclaimer, in this series of videos, I'm going to address the larger special education system, which I refer to as a silo, not referencing any school, school district, university, or teacher preparation program. All right, I am addressing systematic racism in the larger silo. As well, disclaimer, I am a white man, always have been. I can never know what it's like to be a person of color living in our society. I am also not an expert in this area. And I did not want to spend my summer researching this area. But stuff happens. George Floyd was murdered. So I feel we all have a responsibility for addressing issues of racism in our own way. This is my way, using my little small voice as a scholar to address racism in special education. And what I describe is an accumulation of research and thinking and scholarly work that others have done. Two books specifically that influenced me greatly: Ibram X. Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist, a brilliant writer who mixes the narrative of his life story with his coming to understand race, racism, and anti-racism. And the second one, Why Are So Many Minority Students in Special Education, by Beth, Harry, and Jeanette Klinger, a 3-year qualitative study that went where numbers cannot go, into the corners of special education and special education in a large school district in a system. First published in 2005, the second edition 2014. Even though it may be dated, it speaks to us today. These issues have not gone away. So let's start by defining our terms. Race is a classism of people based on physiological features. All right, someone said, oh, these people are the same. Let's put them in a group. All right, characteristics such as skin or color. But human beings genetically are 99.9% the same. So race is a social construct. Someone decided to put people into groups, and human beings decided that other human beings should be in these groups. It is a social construct. As well, we can't separate the social construct from its historical nature. A social construct doesn't mean it exists. So any conversations about race and racism, and this isn't Andy speaking, this is an accumulation of the scholars that I've read this summer, has to look at the enslavement of people, the oppression of people. This is all part of the universal consciousness and unconscious as we bring life to these issues. We cannot ignore that these things did not and do not happen. Ethnicity is a classification. Again, someone decided to put people in groups according to common cultural origin, religion, language, tribe, or background. It provides people within that group with a shared sense of identity. All right? It could be based on race, but it is also based on religion or tradition, and we have various ethnic groups. Culture, on the other hand, is a set of attitudes, belief, worldview, behaviors, values, ways of looking at the world. And it defines the general behavior, worldview, and way of life of the people within the group. And there are different types of cultures. We can belong to more than one culture at the same time. There's an athletic culture, a football culture, a college campus culture, a gun culture, a biking culture, a religious, all these different types of cultures provide people within that group with a set of behaviors and worldviews and values. Now, disability is, this is how the Americans with Disabilities Act defines disability: as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And these could include caring for yourself, eating, sleeping, walking, etc. And you can read there. That is the Americans with Disabilities Act. That is their definition. However, like race, it's a social construct based on a mythical norm. This is the normal and you're not it, so we're going to put you into a group. For example, learning disabilities didn't exist 100 years ago. We have created that, and learning disabilities and emotional behavioral disorders and ADHD didn't exist 100 years ago. It's a social construct that keeps evolving. People with intellectual disabilities, at one point, it was people who were had 70 IQ or below. All of a sudden, they changed it to 85, IQ of 85 or below, and the whole thing changed. So this has always shifted over time. Disability is a social construct based on what normal is, and it says you're not it. And we'll explore that in just a minute. The medical model, there's two major models, a medical model and social model. The medical model says there is a deficit or a deficiency. Something is wrong with the person. There's an order and you are out of it. A disorder, it needs treatment. It needs to be fixed. We need to prescribe something. And the special education, sadly, relies mostly on this medical model of thinking about disabilities of all kinds as a deficit, something that needs to be fixed. You go to a special room and people will give you prescribed treatments. Disability, the social model says a disability is simply society's restrictions. It makes an impairment be a disability. For example, an impairment is a condition or part of the body or mind that is non-standard, like a missing limb or being blind, a defective organ, or a mental health condition. It is the disadvantage or restriction of society that turns an impairment into a disability. Impairment, disability. No restriction, no disability. All right, so it is restrictions or disadvantages of society that turns an impairment into a disability. Now, in educational settings, there are things that we do that turn restrictions into impairments, or turn impairments into a disability. Human beings naturally want to learn, or hardwired to learn. So what happens? What gets in the way of this natural inclination to learn? What turns an impairment into a disability? Well, some of the restrictions are things that happen within the community, socioeconomic things, poverty. Too many students in the classroom is a major cause, major restriction. Teaching in ways that are inappropriate for the students. Teaching things that are of no interest or relevance to the student. Teaching in ways that are not aligned with cultures. And poorly trained teachers or unqualified teachers. These are all the types, this isn't all of them, but all the types of restrictions in an educational setting that turns an impairment into a disability, which is a social construct. Ableism is any discrimination or suppression based on ability. We're normal, they are not, and we're going to ignore the restrictions. We don't take the ADA seriously, Americans with Disabilities Act. We don't want those people in our classroom. They will disrupt learning for us normal, quote, students. So it's discrimination based on ability. There are special ed classrooms and there are, quote, normal classrooms. This idea of normal and abnormal, ableism. Discrimination, suppression based on disability. They can't really do it. Now, there is an intersectionality of disability and race. That's called discrit. These are two, disability in critical race theory, a intersection of those two. These are two marginalized groups, and they cannot be analyzed. One affects the other, and the other affects one. And we'll be looking at that in another video. This has just been an overview of race and disabilities.